Hi, everyone. My name is Blake Cadwell. I am the co-founder and CEO at Soundly.com, and I'm joined here today by Dr. Amy. We're going to have a conversation about the things that you should think about as you purchase hearing aids for the first time. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I'm a hearing aid wearer. And when I went through the process of choosing a hearing aid and choosing my care, the way that I would receive care, I found it incredibly confusing, and I hope this conversation can shed some light on the overall process. So, Dr. Amy, we're really happy to have you here. If you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll just jump right into the conversation.
Thanks, Blake. Yes, I'm Amy Sarow. I'm a doctor of audiology. I'm based in Michigan, and I also do work in the hearing healthcare space in addition to my clinical work, and I'm a Forbes Health Advisory Board member.
Let's just jump right in. If I'm someone who thinks I might have hearing loss, maybe I'm missing the sounds from the TV or I'm missing conversation. What's the first thing I really should think about? I mean, in my mind, the question is, do I even have hearing loss? Is it that bad? What's actually causing the problems that I'm experiencing? Where do you like to start when you meet with a patient?
Well, that's a fantastic question. So the first thing that you want to do is get a hearing test, because if you suspect, if you even think maybe I have trouble hearing, that's the best way to find out if you do. Hearing loss, especially sensory neural hearing loss, age-related hearing loss, can sneak up gradually. And so you might not notice it until you've reached a certain level of hearing difficulty. So definitely, I always recommend that people consider a hearing test, even as just a baseline by age 50, because then you know at that point, okay, yes, I have hearing loss, or no, I don't. And you have it as a baseline to move forward with. And then from there, if you do have some hearing loss, you can start a conversation about what your options are.
That makes sense. Yeah, I know in my case, when I got a hearing test at Costco for the first time, actually, and I didn't purchase hearing aids there, but I was able to get that free test, and it gave me the baseline you're talking about. And then later I found online hearing tests, and then eventually ended up seeing an audiologist and got a real proper hearing test, an audiogram, which ultimately helped program my hearing aids. So I guess let's talk about styles. If you do establish you have hearing loss, if someone's been spending some time online researching, they might be seeing different styles, some that are, different shapes and sizes. Can you talk to us about style and how someone might go about choosing a style that's right for them?
Certainly. Well, there are two main categories in terms of style. There's the kind that goes behind the ear, which you can think of a behind the ear hearing aid or a receiver in the canal. We call them BTE or RIC. And nowadays, those are also, people think, oh, that's going to be a really big hearing aid, but they're actually fairly discreet nowadays. And then the other category to think about is custom hearing aids, which come in a range of sizes. So there's an in-the-ear hearing aid, which will fill the whole ear canal, the ear area there. And then you have smaller hearing aids all the way down to something like an invisible in the canal hearing aid. Now, if you are someone who really wants to use a smartphone, wants to be able to stream music, do those sorts of things, you're not going to get an IIC hearing aid because that won't allow you those options. Since the smaller the size of the hearing aid, the less technology will fit on the inside.
That makes sense. I know that I've tried most of these styles. I ultimately, most of the time, wear a hearing aid that sits behind the ear with the receiver that ends up inside the ear. Is that the most common style that people choose?
It is definitely the most common. I want to say something like 80% of hearing aid users, perhaps more, tend to go with that style of hearing aid for a few reasons. The most current technology always becomes available first in that RIC or the behind the ear style. And so that's going to be the latest technology. And then it will also come to the other styles of hearing aids, but usually at a little bit later date. There's also a wide range in terms of fitting options. So it can fit quite a wide range of hearing loss. There's different options for the piece that can go in the ear, that can make use of natural acoustic hearing for people who have natural low frequency hearing, but need a boost in the high frequencies. And then there's other additional types of earpieces that will work for somebody with more hearing loss that's going to need more volume.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know for me, I resonate with what you said. When I first thought about getting hearing aids behind the ear, I was worried they'd be really, bulky and visible. And in many cases, I find that they're more invisible than some of the in-the-ear styles because of how discreet that wire is that tucks into my ear canal. So let's talk a little bit about features. You got to this, you talked about this a little bit as you're thinking about style, because some styles, don't have all the features available. But what are some of the big features that folks should look for when they're thinking about purchasing hearing aids? What do people find helpful, and what are some of the features that are maybe less important?
So one of the big ones to think about is what type of battery you want. So there's rechargeable hearing aids nowadays, and then you have the disposable batteries. And with the hearing aids they're really like small computers, they're miniaturized computers. They need a lot of power. And so that's one of the reasons why the rechargeable has become more prevalent in recent years. It's also convenient for many people. Every night you charge your cell phone. Same thing with the hearing aids. Just put them in the charger and put them in the morning. They turn on for you. You're good to go. Put them in the charger at night. It's pretty easy. But then some people, so I would say the majority of hearing aid wearers nowadays choose rechargeable, but there are reasons why someone might go the other way. And there are disposable options as well. And those will just require you to change those batteries. Now, certain styles of hearing aids, like I mentioned, the customs, depending on the size of the hearing aid, not every manufacturer will have a rechargeable option. So again, if rechargeability is something that you're looking for, that's something you'll also want to consider.
What about Bluetooth? I know, a lot of folks now are looking for ways to stream music, stream phone calls. Is that now common in hearing aids? And how would I know if a hearing aid is Bluetooth enabled?
Most hearing aids nowadays, especially the behind the ear styles, they're going to have Bluetooth options. It's the custom hearing aids where you have to think about it a little bit more, depending on the size of it. If you have an ITC or an IIC, an IIC is in most cases, you're just not going to have those Bluetooth options. But if you go a little bit bigger and if you're communicating that with the person who is helping to fit you, they can perhaps make a selection on the form or send in an order so that they can get those features for you. But it will be the larger ITE styles that will have Bluetooth. And it's Android and iPhone. It depends a little bit on which companies you go with. Some of them have made for iPhone, like Resound and Oticon, for example. And so they work very well with those. And then they will also work with some Android devices, but you'll want to check that your cell phone is on the list of compatible options in terms of cell phones, if that's something that's important to you.
That makes sense. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like most of the behind the ear style hearing aids are going to have Bluetooth, you're going to have rechargeability, at least on the premium devices, those things are going to be available. But then as you get smaller and smaller towards the invisible hearing aid, it's just totally inside your ear, you might start to see those features fall away. Maybe you don't get rechargeability, maybe you don't get Bluetooth, and that would be something to talk to your doctor about.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we've talked about features and style. The last piece to talk about here is care. So how will you actually purchase these hearing aids? Who helps you fit them? Who customizes them to your hearing loss? Let's talk about a few of those different models, maybe starting with the most common, which is the prescription model through a local audiologist. And you obviously have lots of experience with this as an audiologist yourself. Maybe you can speak to us about some of the advantages of going to a local audiologist in order to get your hearing aids.
Definitely. I think that getting a hearing test is a great first step. Then you know what your hearing loss is and what options might work well for you. It also helps, to have someone take a look in your ear and they can let you know in terms of, if your ear canal has unusual anatomy or if there are certain things that you'll want to consider about retention, keeping that piece in your ear. That's all just good information to know. Sometimes when people come in, they'll say, oh, I have trouble, keeping my headphones in my ears. And we can talk about like, oh, well, actually, your right ear has a very narrow ear canal opening and it's shaped this way. So you may want to try this type of a device, or perhaps with, a retention piece canal lock or something like that. So you can just get a little bit more customized, individualized recommendations as far as that goes. And then having a hearing test, even if you decide not to see an audiologist, if you decide to go somewhere else, you at least know what your situation is, and then you can make good choices from there.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice. Start with great information about your own health, and then you can make decisions. And to that point, there are a couple of other care models that are available to folks. I've had a chance to try most of them, but most people will go to a local doctor who will help them find the right hearing aid, program it to their hearing loss, and then coach them through the process. And that's obviously what Dr. Amy's referencing. Another option is what is often called the direct to consumer model, which is a handful of companies that provide telehealth services. So some of the most popular ones are Audicus and Jabra Enhance Select. You essentially would meet with an audiologist remotely through a video call or through a phone call. They would gather a hearing test from you that you've either taken and received in person, or maybe you've taken a test online. Then they program your hearing aids to match that loss and ship them to your home. So that's the direct to consumer, still a prescription channel. And then the last one has gotten so much news as of late, and that is over-the-counter hearing aids. And over-the-counter hearing aids are different because you don't have a doctor or a professional that's fitting your hearing aids to your loss. So you do all of that at home. Most of the time, you have a smartphone app, you connect your hearing aids to that smartphone app. Maybe you take a test or you use dials and you adjust the sound quality and the sound itself to match your hearing loss. So puts you in control, but also is imprecise sometimes. And if you're not someone who likes to kind of be DIY with your own technology, it can be a frustrating process. The other thing to note is that in general, over-the-counter hearing aids do not have all of the prescription level premium features that Dr. Amy referenced, like Bluetooth and rechargeability, and even some of the more sophisticated sound algorithms. Dr. Amy, I don't know if there's anything you'd add to that, but that's kind of how I think about the three care models that are available.
Yeah, definitely. It all comes down to how much support someone is looking for, what their situation is. Also, when you see a professional, there are, follow-up care services in person where there's regular hearing aid cleanings, adjustments. And if you need more specific programs and this sort of thing, that professional is going to be able to work with you on a more one-on-one type basis with those things to really best meet your needs.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having this conversation. I hope this has been helpful for folks who've been following along. If you want more great research, you can go to soundly.com. We have a lot of research on our blog. We also have the ability to compare products side by side. You can look at their features and different specs on everything from the top of the line prescription products all the way to some of the most affordable over-the-counter products. But thank you all. Good luck in your search, and we hope to hear from you soon.